My intention in the next handful of minutes is to be a painkiller for every single presentation you give from this point forward. Let's get into it. How do you keep audience attention during a presentation? This is my job. This is what I get to do day to day. And in this video, I'm gonna share a model and a framework that I use and think about every single presentation that I plan. And I'm also gonna answer 3 particular questions from a client. So I was leading a session on how to make virtual engagement easy for North Dakota State University, and students followed up with 3 really brilliant questions afterward that I'm gonna cover in this video. One of them was, do you have any examples of context hook? So in order to share what the context hook is, I have to lay out the 5 ingredients for virtual engagement that I was teaching them. If you've been subscribed to the channel anytime, you may have seen some of this, and so feel free to skip past to the next section, although it's always a really great review because these 5 ingredients, without fail, every single time I invite people to infuse them into their meetings or gatherings, raise engagement. They keep people's attention, they reset people's attention. And so the 5 ingredients map to the timeline of an event. So as if this was the start and this was the end, right? I would say the first ingredient actually happens before the official start time. I call it the unofficial start, phrase that I picked up from Mark Collard, the founder of Plamio in Australia. The second ingredient that I talk about can happen very, very quickly. But if you miss it, the rest of your gathering is kind of useless. And the language that I would give to that is rooted in the student's question, content hook. What is it about your content, your presentation, your facilitation, the way that you're engaging people that says not only like, are you doing something entertaining to keep their attention, but is actually communicating this is valuable enough to pay attention for the whole time? And so we'll talk about 3 particular types of context hooks that you can create that are really, really effective. And if you're curious about the other 5 ingredients, this one, connection before content, this one, which is 80% of most people's gatherings, I talk about the idea of designing content for contribution rather than consumption. And then last but not least, being really deliberate about the closing. If you wanna dive deeper specifically into those 5 ingredients for virtual and in-person and hybrid engagement, check out this video on how to encourage active participation. For now though, let's zoom right in on this idea of a context hook. So you can imagine, especially virtually, right? Everybody clicks a link, even though they're in the same cyberspace, they're not in the same space. It's a different temperature where you are. They just had a different 3 hours than you did. Everything is different except for the link that you clicked on, for the most part. And so I believe to complete teleportation, I don't think that just clicking the link is enough to actually teleport into the same context. A really good presenter or host or facilitator is a master at saying something or doing something that brings everybody into the same context. And so if you scroll back to the very first 4 seconds of this video, one of my favorites lately, especially with a group that might be on the fence about participating in whatever it is you're presenting, is this idea that my intention is to be a painkiller for, so if I'm leading a session with a bunch of leaders at a leadership retreat that aren't super psyched to be there because they're busy and they have lots of other stuff to do, I might say my intention is to be a painkiller for the next 100+ hours of virtual meetings that you'll be in, whether we're here or not, right? So I just steer right into that. You notice the word intention shows up. I'm not a huge fan of acronyms, but somewhat accidentally, the acronym ICE showed up. And so I think about a context hook is even more effective at an icebreaker at breaking the ice, meaning breaking the like cold hard ice off the cynics and pessimists in the group that are like, I don't want to be here, right? And so the first phrase stands for intention. And if you've ever read me and Will's book, Ask Powerful Questions, the first chapter is titled Intention, because I don't believe you can have any conversation that matters without a really, really crystal clear intention. And the idea, the Latin root to the word intention actually means to stretch or stretching. And I love that because I think a proper intention stretches over the needs of the entire group and has a little bit of empathy and says, what do you actually care about? And let me speak directly to that. So it's, an intention is not, I'm gonna cover this, blah, 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 blah. It's actually, what does that person care about most? And can I put that into a clear sentence and intention and say that right toward the beginning of my gathering. And so that brings us to the C in ICE, which is currency. I would say that as human beings, there are roughly maybe only 4 currencies or buckets of currencies that we actually care about. The 4 buckets of currency that your audience might be caring about, that if you speak to those currencies will capture their attention, invite them and hook them into the same context, are time, which is a very limited resource, right? We all have too much to do in too little time. And so if you say at the beginning of a meeting, what I'm gonna share with you today is gonna save you 2 hours next week alone, they're gonna be a little bit intrigued because you're saving them that currency of time, this non-renewable resource. Second currency is money. If you're gonna be teaching them or sharing something that will directly earn them money or allow them in the future to access or have more money, people care about that. Or if it's a method to save money, etc. And the third currency, a little bit softer, is mood. So if what your audience cares about is feeling happy or having fun or whatever else, your intention or your context hook, your statement in that moment might speak directly to that mood currency. And so think about each of the 3 of those, can you come up with a sentence? First of all, empathize with what does your audience actually care about most? Can you come up with a sentence that speaks to that, encapsulates that, and make that sentence really compelling? And that, if you wanna hook people into the same context in under 30 seconds, that is the way to do it. The 4th bucket for currency that I would say is community or belonging. The ability to actually show up to a place and feel like, these are my people, I'm accepted, I can be exactly who I am, I don't need to put on any sort of mask, etc. And so if your audience cares about that, either at an explicit level, they've said that, or they've expressed that, which usually doesn't happen, or more likely at an implicit level, to say, hey, my intention right now is to lead a connection exercise so that, and by the way, that "so that" phrase is a really good one to add on to your intention. So once you think you're done with your little intention statement, add the words "so that" and then fill that in afterward. So my intention is to be a painkiller for the next 100+ hours of virtual meetings so that you don't end every single day feeling totally exhausted and burnt out, right? You see how that "so that" adds like another layer of why, or another potential currency there as well. Last but very much not least, because it's a really powerful tool, the E in ICE stands for experience. Let's see if I can actually spell this right. Hey! So sharing an intention, being really clear about that, having a compelling context hook, that statement is great, but sometimes for some audiences, it's not enough because you might be a good teacher or a good presenter, you might be good at keeping people's attention, but experience is by far the best teacher and the most effective at keeping people's attention. And so another way that I like to hook people into the same context to keep their attention right at the beginning or right toward the beginning and potentially a few times throughout, depending on how long and why we're meeting, is creating some experience. So I'll give you an example of that. One of my favorites is this exercise that I learned as train station greetings. And so virtually, I'd have a group just find an object somewhere around their desk and cover up their camera. So keep their camera on, but just cover up their camera with something so we can't see them. And in that mode, I imagine them to be in a particular state of mind. So go back to 2020 and imagine you were in one of the most frustrating virtual meetings of your entire year. And be in that state. Imagine what were your nonverbals like, what was your facial expressions, what were you thinking? We're not gonna stay here for very long. And then in 3, 2, 1, remove the object and just be in that state. Be in that nonverbal, be in that posture, etc. And then I say, okay, whoa. First of all, inviting people to be in gallery view for that, really useful because you get to see what a crappy Zoom meeting looks like. And then you could do this in person totally as well, right? I think we learned this all at some point. Peekaboo, you just have people cover their face, be in that state, and then reveal as well. So Round two, because I don't want to end there. Round two, cover up your camera. Imagine that you're on a train in a brand new city that you've never been to, and the train is arriving at the stop that you're about to get off at. And much to your surprise, with no coordination whatsoever, you step off the train platform, and one of your absolute best friends of all time is standing on the train platform. Imagine your state then. Imagine your facial expressions, your gestures, your reaction, and in 3, 2, 1, be in that state. And what happens is Zoom gallery view lights up and everybody's in this state of, ooh, I'm really excited to see you. What happens is that what you notice in gallery view is that people continue to grin. They're like, oh, that was kind of interesting, right? I never did that in Zoom. There's this little effect that happens, and my state of being and state of mind actually in that moment teleports through the camera into the group's state of being, state of mind, and vice versa all around. That's the idea, going back to our acronym here, of if you can create an experience like that, that invites everybody into the same context, into the same state of mind, it's really powerful. I'll give you one other example how to do that. So a best practice for facilitating virtually for me is if you want to invite people into the same boat and you want more people to engage, choose to turn their cameras on if they can, I often actually ask everybody to turn their videos off and to go totally dark for a minute. And I might invite them to do an exercise. So grab 2 sticky notes, grab something to write with. On one sticky note, write down the current state of mind that you're in. One word that describes the current frame of mind, state of being that you're in. And then on a second sticky note, write down one word that describes the state of being or state of mind that you would like to be in at the end of our time together today. And I'm gonna count down from 5. And when I get to 0, I'd like you to turn on your camera and hold up that second word to the camera so that we can see, and be in gallery view so that we can see what state of mind people want to be in at the end. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Holding up those sticky notes to the camera. Really brilliant way to actually go from experience and implicitly invite people to get clear about their intention. When I ask people what their state is, or what state they want to be in, I'm actually asking them, what's your intention for yourself during this time? So now I want to just really directly answer 2 brilliant questions that came from the group. And I'm going to read them so that I get them verbatim in these student leader words. So the first one is, as an introvert and an eternal cynic or pessimist, how do I keep an audience engaged? And so first of all, to whoever answered that question, or if you consider yourself an eternal pessimist, I love you, right? There's actually a way that I'm drawn toward the energy of somebody who is a little bit of a pessimist or is a little bit cynical, because often that's actually just realistic. And I would say the best way to keep an audience engaged, if you are that, or if you're an eternal optimist or anything else, is to be yourself. People respond really, really well to authenticity and really, really poorly to fake energy. Like these videos, who I am in these videos, this is who I am when I wake up in the morning at 6 a.m., maybe sometimes much to my wife's dismay. And it's who I am in the middle of the day, it's who I am with a client, it's who I am with friends, it's just who I am. And I work really hard to maintain that level of authenticity because I know that it is one of the shortest distances to actually connect with somebody. And so, yeah, live out that realism if you tend to fall in that bucket. And then the third question that they ask is so good for thinking about how to keep an audience's attention, right? Also, if you're enjoying this, I've got a future video tutorial coming out that talks about attention resets and how to reset people's attention multiple times throughout. And so I guess that would be my invitation to subscribe to the channel. Maybe I think there's a notification bell. I don't really understand how that works. But if you want to get notified about that, about how to keep people's attention and re-spark it throughout and kind of create a heartbeat rhythm to your presentation as opposed to a flatline, monotone boringness, subscribe to the channel and check that out. So third question, I got to read verbatim. For the interactions that did not work so well to get people engaged, how did you recover from those poor reactions? And what have you learned from those experiences? So let me tell you an immense failure of my own. When I first started We and Me, one of my first big corporate clients was JetBlue Airways. I was so excited to work with them. I was going to New York City to their corporate headquarters. It was so fancy. I walked in, I was like, wow, this place is dynamite. And I've got this group, they're all learning and development professionals, and we're sitting in this room and starting to lead this workshop, giving content, and I just could gauge that like people were not intrigued, like people were just kind of flatlining. And that obviously made my heart rate go up quite a bit. And the way that I was, and I don't know how in the moment I was able to salvage this, I would probably attribute this wisdom to a mentor of mine who taught me what I'm about to share with you. But what I had the gut sense to do in that moment was check in with the group and lean into that failure rather than like trying to make up for it. The idea was let me steer into the process of what's happening rather than just the content of what I'm saying. So to make this a little bit more visual, there's this idea that there's always something happening while something's happening. And so while you're sharing any content in a presentation, right, there is also simultaneously this process happening. And so if you think about content, like what you're actually saying, process is literally everything else. It's what people are thinking, it's the group dynamics, it's how something is rolling out, etc. And so the tool and what I decided to do in that moment when engagement was really not going well and going low was to take a break from content, right, and drop down into process and ask about that, check in with the group about that so that we can actually bring process into the top of mind, into the content, into conversation. And so the way that I did that was a little bit vulnerable, but I looked out at the group and I just said, hey, I have a sense that what's happening right now is like not totally landing. And so can you just share with me on a scale of this is going really well, I'm getting lots of takeaways and value, to this is not going so well, we need to switch things up, Chad, where are you at? And so I did that with the group in the moment, and this was in person, and what I saw was like this. And JetBlue is a very polite internal culture, so it probably meant like this. And so my next question was, okay, well, I definitely don't want to end like this. And so can you speak to me and give me a little bit of feedback and transparent thoughts on how we can bump this up a notch? And what the group said was really brilliant. They were like, hey, we've been sitting for a little while. We actually want to get up and move. Do you have any exercises that can actually immerse us in this material? I was like, of course, absolutely, yes. Oh my goodness, I can't believe that we've been sitting down for X amount of time, right? So you see how that content process dynamic, if something's not going well, I dip down into process, check in with the group about it, or simply just acknowledge the process and say, hey, I recognize that what we just attempted to do was, while it was intended to be fun, it wasn't. And so let's switch gears. Can you actually, in the chat, just tell me what is fun for you? Like when you're having an absolute blast, what is fun, right? So a way to just kind of steer into that that process and taking a little break from content would be my absolute number one tip. The trick there really is letting go of when you do something that doesn't work in a presentation, our brains go into the fight, flight, or need to be right mindset. And so the trick really is to actually let go of that need to be right, take a couple breaths, get out of your amygdala or your lizard brain, and step into this place of openness where you're actually open to the group informing you what they want rather than trying to know what a group wants at every single moment. If you like this, I send out weekly videos over email. You can access that and a ton of free resources at the link below, weand.me/free. I'm Chad Littlefield. Have an awesome day.